So welcome everyone to Greyfriars Convent, for some of you again, and for some of you for the first time, I think. So welcome to a talk which we entitled, Does God Exist? And we hope that this will become a seminar, so several talks in a series that bring together faith and reason. Look at a topic from both perspectives, a topic that's accessible to both faith and reason. And my name is Sister Nicholas Marie. I have an accent because I'm Polish, not because I'm American. So let us start with prayer. So today is a feast of Saint Albert the Great, who is one of the great Dominican saints. So I thought we can start with together saying this prayer to him. It's a prayer for the Mass for him. So let us pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, who made the Bishop Saint Albert great by his joining of human wisdom to divine faith, grant, we pray, that we may so adhere to the truths he taught, that through progress in learning we may come to a deeper knowledge of love of you. Through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. So I'd like to start with several reasons for you even having this talk. And the first reason is really the fact that we, the Dominican sisters, are Dominican. Throughout the Dominican history, from the very beginning, 800 years ago, the natural knowledge, science, philosophy, reason in general, was essential to the Dominican order. The marrying of the faith and reason was always at the basis of our apostolate. The earliest wave of vocations to the order in 1200s actually came from students and professors of European universities. And throughout the ages, the Dominican order has as its saints men and women who were intellectuals, who were scholars, not always educated in an academic setting, but always very, very vibrant intellectually. So that lies very much in our tradition. Second of all, I mean, we are an order in the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church also has that commitment to the harmony between faith and reason. And here's a quote from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 36. Our Holy Mother, the Church, holds and teaches that God, the first principle and last end of all things, can be known with certainty from the created world by the natural light of human reason. Without this capacity, man would not be able to welcome God's revelation. Man has this capacity because he is created in the image of God. So right there at the beginning of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, we have this very strong call to both faith in God, but also arriving at knowledge of God's existence by reason alone. And even that quote says that in order to welcome revelation, we need natural knowledge. And that has been the teaching of the Church always. So the Dominican order, the Catholic Church, there's also part of it is by personal story. And I think it would be probably helpful for you to know where I'm coming from, not only from Poland, but I'm actually, by education, by training, I'm a mathematician. I studied mathematics for a long time before I became a sister. So I'm not a scientist, I'm not a philosopher, I'm not a theologian, but I am a mathematician. And I think that's going to be important because what we will be talking about a lot today is philosophy and science. So I want you all to be clear that I am not a specialist in either of those two. I have some knowledge about both, but that's not my area of expertise, even though I really like both of them. but throughout what brought me actually to the Dominican order and actually back to my faith was the conviction that there is a harmony between faith and reason. Like, I remember being in high school and loving science and sitting in the church and not seeing that harmony, and that for a while that actually made me walk away from the church. But even in the midst of that, I had a very strong sense that they supposed to be compatible. I never lost my faith in God. I always knew that God existed, that there had to be something more. Even though it was so vague, there had to be something more. That actually led me back to the fullness of the faith, back to the church, into the Dominican order. So that's my side of the story. So here we are. Does God exist? So before we get to the question, let's ask a simpler question. Let's ask the question, does Australia exist? Is there anyone who've been to Australia in this room? Oh, great. We have a few people who actually have been there, because this is my first example. Our traveler, Joe, and he just came back from Australia. So he can tell us for certain that, yes, Australia exists, and last summer, that's where he spent his holiday, and he saw the kangaroos, the koala bears, he went to the Sydney Symphony. It exists. So what he has is experiential knowledge of the fact that Australia exists. And if you think about what would it take for him to lose that certitude, he would actually have to admit that he was crazy, right? So our experiential knowledge gives us a very high level of certitude. We either acknowledge the fact as true, or we have to acknowledge that we are crazy. Right? A very high level of certitude. But we also have little Stevie, who is 3, or maybe 4, or maybe 5. I don't know, he's little. And he is also convinced that Australia exists, and he says, yes. Why? Because my mom told me all about it. And there are kangaroos there, and koalas, and lots of different creatures that we've never seen. And now he has the truth, and he also has the certitude in that truth. However, his certitude is based on trust. We actually would use the word belief in this sense. He really doesn't know that Australia exists. He believes that Australia exists. And his knowledge is based on the trust that his mom does not lie, and his trust that his mom knows a lot, if not everything. If he's little, he probably thinks that she knows everything. Now, what will probably happen to him with time is that he will realize that, well, his mom does not know everything. And, hopefully not, but he might actually, have an experience that his mom wasn't always totally telling him truth all the time. And that happens actually to teenagers. I mean, when you have that rebellion of a teenager in high school, that's what happens. They lose that innocent trust in their parents, and they start questioning a lot of things. Right? We all have seen that. If we are teachers, we all have seen that on many different levels. But nevertheless, he also has knowledge, which is true and certain. Okay? So how about all of us who have not been to Australia and are not 5? All of you probably are in your head saying, yes, Australia exists, and I am certain of that. Right? So why is that? Well, this is something that we call convergence of possibilities. So if you look at the world, how do I arrive at the fact that Australia exists? I've never been there, but that's what I've learned in school. I've seen the kangaroos in the zoo, so I actually have some correspondence between what I've learned with school, and I have some experience of the animals like that in reality. I've seen documentaries on TV. I've read articles in the newspapers. I know some history. I might know that we have diplomatic relationships with this country, and I'm pretty certain I've read the documents. And I've met people who claim they're either from there or they've been there. Right? So if you take one of those things, you can doubt one of those things, one of those arguments, reasons, separate of the other ones, right? Well, there are some things, not many, hopefully, I've learned in school that turn out to be false. Right? Maybe that's one of them. Kangaroos, maybe they come from somewhere else. I've seen many shows on TV that are nowhere close to the truth. And in the time that we are living, how hard is it to make a distinction between what's real and what's computer generation on TV? So you can take all of those little reasons and disprove them, doubt them. Right? But if you take them all together to disprove all of them, you would have to say that there is some kind of an evil plot that wants us to believe that Australia exists when it's false. So it would be unreasonable for us to have all of that stuff and not believe, not know that Australia exists. Right? So we would say that this is the closest we can come to experiential knowledge. So if the experiential knowledge is not there for us, the convergence of possibilities, that wave of small arguments, add up to a certitude. And none of us would say, I believe Australia exists, right? We actually would use the word, I know Australia exists. So now, what if I want to arrive at as certain knowledge as possible. So I'm not satisfied with, just belief, and I'm not satisfied with the convergence of possibilities. I want the strongest argument possible. Well, it's going to depend on the question. So first of all, we want to arrive at truth. So as human beings, as men and women, we actually have two tools, two ways of coming to know the truth. And they are reason and intuition. They're actually both acts of our intellect, but it's our intellect acting in two different ways. Reason is step-by-step knowledge. It's sort of like a mathematical proof. You go from what's known, step-by-step, using logic, and you arrive at some new knowledge. Intuition is different. Intuition is you're grasping the truth with one sweep notion. And to give you an example, imagine that you have a friend far away, and that friend sends you a letter. As you're reading that letter, your reason is working. Right? You're adding one and one together, you're understanding what your friend is writing. But you also, if you know and love your friend, you might also have a gut feeling that there is something more. The words can be all, happy and positive and whatever, and you know that something is wrong. That's intuition. So in our everyday life and in our pursuit of knowledge, both of those ways of arriving at truth are happening. Okay? So let's look at reason. Under reason, we can look at several sciences. They all have different scopes and they have a little bit different methodology. So if I want to arrive at a certain truth for a question, I need to know to which of those sciences is most capable in answering the question at hand. Okay? So what we have here, we have the sciences, so natural sciences like physics, chemistry, social sciences, psychology, history, and all of that stuff. Then we have mathematics, philosophy, and theology. Okay? And in this particular order, those sciences are dealing with more abstract objects. So sciences deal with physical stuff, with material reality. Mathematics deals with quantity, which starts in the physical world, but then gets abstracted. We all see circles, round objects in reality, and we abstract, and we get a notion of a circle, a definition of a circle, and mathematics goes from there. Right? So it's a little bit more abstract than just physical stuff. And then philosophy goes even further. The philosophy is going to deal with knowledge as such, being as such, goodness as such. So it's going to get to ideas that really don't even need the material in order to exist, to be talked about and all of that. And then theology deals with God. So there is this level of abstraction that goes up as we move through those sciences. And actually there is also an increase in certitude there, at least on an objective kind of a level, because the more abstract the object, the more knowable it is. There's more you can know about it, and that's really where the certitude is. On the other hand, we also have to take into consideration our tools of knowledge, so our human intellect. So even though philosophy, the statements in philosophy, the facts of philosophy are more certain than the facts of mathematics, we actually, with our intellect, will find mathematics more certain. Because the way mathematics is designed, it fits our mind better. So I think that's the reason why there's so much cloudiness in philosophy these days. It's because our mind is really not powerful enough to get that certitude in philosophy and feel certain. But objectively speaking, philosophy is more certain than mathematics, than science. Few words about methodology here. Sciences use experimental method to arrive at truth, right? So if I'm a scientist and I want to test something, I'm going to design an experiment, run it, and it has to satisfy certain conditions in order for me to say, yes, this is actually a fact. Mathematics, philosophy, and theology use logic. They have very similar methodology. They deal with different objects, but have very similar methodology. So just to clarify one term, science very often uses the word theory. And the way science uses the word theory is very different from the way we use theory in our common speech. Because when I say I have a theory, it really says I'm not sure whether it's true or false. Right? That's not the case in science. So when you're looking at a scientific paper or really scientific claim, and it uses the word theory, it's really a scientific fact. If a scientist wants to say that he or she is uncertain whether a statement is true or false, they are going to use the word hypothesis. And we have that in mathematics as well. We use a conjecture for something that we are just checking out, and theorem for something that we know is true. We have a proof. The intuition. There are three things that definitely come underneath intuition. So what are the kind of things we know by intuition? First, principles. A famous principle of contradiction. A thing cannot be and not be at the same time under the same aspect, right? So a thing cannot be black and white at the same time, or be white and not be white at the same time. It's obvious. Like no one needs to explain it to you. You hear the sentence and you say yes. That's intuitive knowledge. But also art and beauty. There's something. There are some things that poetry can communicate in a much better way than science ever would. Love is one of those things. When you read a love poem, there is a reality, there's a truth conveyed through two verses of a poem that scientists, psychologists can write treatises over and over and over again and never get there. And that's also intuitive. And goodness is another thing that we just know. All right, so a quick test. So here's a quick test. I'm not asking you to say whether those statements are true or false. That's not the point. If you wanted to explore whether each of those three statements were true or false, which science do you go to? So let's take the first one. The sum of the measures of angles in a triangle is more than 180 degrees. If I wanted to know true or false, where do I go? Mathematics. Very good. Great job. Gravity is a natural phenomenon by which all physical bodies attract each other. It is a force proportional to masses of interacting bodies and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. Physics. Right. Emotional neglect during the first 2 years of child's life impedes the formation of relationships in adulthood. Psychology, yeah. Okay, 2 more. 3 more. A whole is greater than any of its parts. Philosophy. Is there anything else about that statement? Like, is it true or false?
How you define whole.
Okay.
It's intuition.
It's intuition, right? A whole should be always greater than any of its parts. Like if you understand the relationship between part and a whole makes that statement true. Right? So it's true that it's philosophy. Philosophy deals with first principles, but it's also very intuitive. Okay, Mary, Mother of God, Mother of Jesus, was immaculately conceived. Theology, right? We'll go to theology. All right, so now to our very reason for us being here, God exists. If I want to know whether that's true or false, where do I go? Okay, theology. Do I have any other candidates?
Intuition.
Intuition, okay.
Prayer.
You can go to prayer, but go back to the sciences. On the reason side, it is true that our experience of God is going to be probably the most certain proof of God's existence for us. Right? I can tell you my conversion story, but that's not an argument. That made me become a sister. That was a very powerful moment for me. But it really has not much of a convincing power. It has an inspiration power. So in the sciences, where would I go?
Natural science.
Natural science.
Philosophy deals with the most abstract things. Right? It's not a question of theology. So maybe this is where we need to start an explanation. It's not a question of philosophy. Philosophy knows that God exists. That's the starting point. Theology. Thank you. Theology presumes that God exists in faith. Right? You will never find in a book of theology a discussion whether God exists. That's a starting point. Right? Theology takes the revealed truth and accepts it as true in faith. And that's the starting point of theology. So theology will talk about God a lot, but it will not prove God's existence. Existence of God is the starting point of theology. So we actually need to, in order to get a certain proof of God's existence, we actually have to look into theology. Philosophy. Thank you. You get it. All right. So here's what I will talk about. We will touch this question of God's existence in five ways. The first one is openness to the existence of the non-material things. Because in order to argue God's existence, right, we know that God is non-material, it's spiritual. There has to be a possibility for existence of things that are not material. So think of it this way: if you were trying to talk to someone about God and they don't believe that spiritual is possible at all, you're wasting your time. You need to convince them first that it's even possible. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I'll give you one formal philosophical argument of God's existence, just to give you a flavor of how it goes and some experience of complexity of it. And then I'll talk more informally about 3 other ways of arriving at the existence of God that can be formalized into philosophical arguments. Then I'll talk a little bit about the intuitive argument, and then we'll take a look at the convergence of possibilities. So that's a quick outline here. All right, so openness to the existence of the non-material things. So as I said, a person, in order to even explore the question of God's existence, has to be open to an existence of anything that's non-material. So the only philosophy or the only stand that's in our way is materialism. Materialism is the only philosophy out there that claims that the spiritual realm does not exist, period. So this is a formal definition of materialism. Materialism is a philosophical position that asserts that all that exists is either material or a property of matter. And there are actually very good, solid philosophical arguments that show that's an unreasonable position to hold. And the arguments go through the reality of human thought. If you think about what happens when you think, the thought, even though it's triggered by the physical, it's not physical itself, and it's not really caused by the physical things. So our intelligence, our experience of thinking, our concept of thought, opens up the way to the existence of spiritual things, non-material things. Spiritual just means non-material, doesn't mean religious. Okay. So the philosophical argument against materialism actually builds on that. But there's some more intuitive human argument that also I think should open people to the idea of the spiritual, to the idea of the non-material, and that's just our makeup. If you think about humankind, we have a huge desire for love, for friendship, for eternity, and those are real desires in us. Now, one could say, well, just because you want something, it doesn't, prove that the thing that you want exists. However, all of our desires are possible to be fulfilled. When we are hungry, we have food to eat. And so it is actually very reasonable to at least be open to the fact that all of our desires are possible to fulfill, and therefore the spiritual ones as well. And the spiritual ones can be only fulfilled if the spiritual realm exists. So it's not a proof of God's existence, but our desires should make it important for us to at least be open to the idea. Okay. So let's go to this formal philosophical argument. This formal, the argument that I will present is actually just looks at one aspect of God. Philosophically, this particular aspect is called that God is an uncaused cause. Okay, but it really is linked to what we would in religion call God is eternal, right? So God exists, period. He is. He didn't come into being. He always existed. He will exist, and that's it. The existence is part of his nature. That's who he is. That's what he is. Okay. So here's how the argument goes. So it starts with a premise. Something exists. So I exist. Sister Nicholas Marie exists. Now, hopefully you know that. I mean, you can see me, you can hear me, you can shake my hand. Hopefully the 3 out of 5 senses will be enough to convince you that I exist. Sister Nicholas Marie exists. Now, this something, Sister Nicholas Marie, is either caused herself to exist, so I made myself, or I was caused by something else to exist, or I have always existed. So now let's eliminate two of those. So nothing can cause itself to exist. If you think about that, that would be a ridiculous claim, because if something causes itself to exist, that means that while it's not, it's acting. I mean, that's an unreasonable statement. That just cannot happen for anything, right? So option A is non-existent. It's not real. It cannot happen. Now, Sister Nicholas Marie has always existed. Well, if that's true, that would prove that I'm God, right? I'm immortal. I'm uncaused cause. Well, my sisters can tell you that that's not true. Right? So I'm not it, really. So if that's not the case, then B is the true option in my case. So something else caused me. Right? Okay, so let's look at that. What are possibilities here? Well, my mom, right? So my mom caused me, but she's not God either. So her grandma, and we can get a nice sequence going on there. It's one of the sequences. I can also say, I exist right now because my heart beats, right? If my heart stops, I'm dead, right? Now my heart beats because there is an impulse, electric impulse going through it, and that's what makes it beat. Now the electric impulse, again, it has an existence because of something, and I can keep on going, right? I can use a philosophical one. I exist because my soul is united to my body, right? Well, there's something that keeps them together, and again, you can keep on going. The bottom line is that no matter, so I have here a series of causes. I'll give you 3 different examples. Now, there cannot be an infinite series of causes without the first cause. So a sequence has to start somewhere. If it didn't start somewhere, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't exist. All right, most of you are nodding. I'm going to go with that. Since most of you are nodding, I'm going to go with that. And say, well, if there is a first cause of my existence, because it's a first cause, first means that it was itself uncaused. Right? That's the meaning of the word first. Right? That means it has always existed. That's God. So that means, therefore, God exists. God as an uncaused cause. Now, there's a jump here. We are looking at God very philosophically. That's what some people refer to, God of philosophers, right? We are looking at God as an uncaused cause. If you want to get to a full image of Christian God, good, perfect, merciful, or powerful, there is some more arguing to do. And some of those are easier. Like, for example, I don't think reason alone can show that God is merciful. Actually, that dependent on our faith. But we can show He's perfect and all-powerful and intelligent, all-knowing. So philosophy has power to show those things, which we are not going to get into. I will, however, stop for a moment on number 4. Because there's actually more philosophy in that point 4, that there is no infinite series of causes without the first cause. And I don't know if any of you are not convinced. I saw a lot of nodding. There are a few people who are not nodding. But I'm a mathematician, so I'm very used to working with infinity. Infinity for me exists, at least in the mind, if not in reality. So I didn't like that argument the first time I saw it. It was not obvious to me that sequence of causality was had to terminate. Right? So as I looked into it and I read more about this particular proof, what became clear to me, there's actually a very fine philosophical distinction there at work. There are 2 types of causality. One type of causality is called an improper causality. And that's the example of me, my mom, my grandma, etc. This is an improper causality because even though I was born because of my mom and my dad, right? I had to pick one for simplification, right? my existence right now does not depend on my mom's existence. I'm independent as a being, as, my mom could die and I would still live. And actually, logically speaking, philosophically speaking, that kind of a sequence could go forever. That might be hard for us to grasp, actually, because we are steeped, for both scientifically and from religion, in the world had a beginning, which is good, it's true. Right? But by reason alone, we actually cannot prove that. It's kind of neat. I like that. We need faith to know that the universe, the time is finite, the time had a beginning. And therefore, therefore, there's no necessity that sequence of, mom, 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 mom would actually start. Now, however, the other type of causality is the proper causality. Those are the proper causality is the one that needs to be happening right now because I exist. So something sustains my existence right now, and that has to terminate. So now, if this confused you, don't worry, just go back to what I said before, that's fine. But I couldn't in good conscience just brush through the argument. If I'm claiming I'm giving a formal philosophical argument, I'm just giving you a hint here. There is actually something philosophically very significant at number 4. And if you read objections of smart people to this particular argument, that's usually where they get stuck on. They don't see it. And in a sense, rightly so, because there's a very fine philosophical distinction that needs to be made in order for that argument to be really formal and step by step. Right? But nevertheless, God exists. Uncaused cause exists. Okay, the informal ones. They all are related to God's perfection and intelligence, and I will approach them on a more intuitive level. So the first one is an argument from beauty and perfection. Our ability to recognize and evaluate beauty and perfection, to say that one thing is better, more beautiful than the other, actually points to an ideal of beauty being somewhere out there. Right? Ideal of perfection existing. And that's God. God is all perfect. Again, you can formalize it into a formal philosophical argument, which I'm not going to try. But beauty and perfection that we see around us point us to existence of God. The second one is from order and intelligibility. If you look at the world around us, things reveal complexity and purpose, even if they're not intelligent themselves. Right? So a part of a human body, eye, works in a certain way, always in the same way, because it was designed in such a way to work. It cannot choose, like I cannot choose to make my eye not work. Right? I can take it out and destroy it and whatever, but I cannot just, I can just close my eyes. That's the only thing I can do not to see. But that process of seeing, it's happening on its own. Right? And you can look at many different examples, of course. But even more so, the universe as a whole manifests great order. Scientists talk about the universe being tuned for life. It's actually amazing that the universe can sustain life. It's improbable. Right? The odds of there being life in the universe are seem to none. And even more so, we actually can understand stuff. Crazy scientists, we can make sense out of creation. There's a knowledge that we can draw from things. Right? So if we can draw knowledge from things, well, the knowledge was put in there, but by a more powerful intellect than our own. And that's God. The third one is an argument from moral law and altruism. All cultures out there have objective moral standards. What I mean by that is that any culture that you don't take in the world, present or past, had a set of right and wrongs that was imposed on everyone in that culture. Now, the actual laws might differ from culture to culture, but nevertheless, there is the moral law in every culture. Even more so, every individual has a conscience. So not only that there is a law out there imposed on me by the society, first of all, recognized by the society that such a thing is good, and then imposed on everyone, I actually personally feel that some things are good and some things are bad. And if I do the evil thing, I feel guilty. So even my own makeup as a human being has that recognition of right and wrong. And then what's really amazing about the humankind is that we admire selflessness and altruism. We are inspired when people lay down their lives for the good of others, and that doesn't really make sense in some way, right? It doesn't make sense if there is no spiritual. And so how does the existence of moral law, the right and wrong, points to God? Well, law, something that applies to everyone, has to be established by an intelligence. It doesn't just happen. There's someone behind it, and that's God. So again, if this seems a little bit too intuitive, it is. There's a lot of formalization that would have to happen in order for it to be a formal philosophical proof. But, all right. An intuitive argument. This is actually an argument that comes from Jacques Maritain. Jacques Maritain was a Catholic philosopher of the 20th century, a very famous one. And he actually said that the modern man has lost an ability to do metaphysics, to really do philosophy. There's something that changed in our habits of thinking that makes it very hard to do philosophy. It's actually, as a mathematician, I agree with that. As I look at kids doing math, I almost think like it's getting even worse, as we go. Like that step-by-step logical thinking, the modern man does not like. And he was concerned about that because philosophy is the highest science, apart from theology, the natural science. Right? And so anyway, so he was concerned about it. He did a lot to call for the study of philosophy, to bring it back, to help men to recover that ability to study metaphysics. But he also proposed an intuitive argument. An intuitive argument is almost an invitation. So what Jacques Maritain said is that contemplate reality. You can think of it as wonder. Wonder in a sense of not just thinking, right? Just let the nature overcome you. The beauty, the order, whatever. So contemplate the nature. And if you take even a small being, and you really in silence look at it, then what's going to happen is that intuitively you're going to become aware of your own existence at the same time as your own nothingness. And faced with that, intuitively, you will be facing the absolute existence, which is God. Now, this in words probably seems like magic, but I would just suggest, try it and see whether that's a convincing argument. However, if you really contemplate a physical thing, whether it leads you to an intuitive knowledge of the absolute existence of God. There are some some of the greatest conversion stories of scientists actually have very little to do with science. They usually have something to do with them actually experiencing reality and just facing God, like in an instant, coming face to face with the ultimate. So, for what it's worth. All right, convergence of possibilities. So, remember our Does Australia Exist example? It's a similar one. Does God exist? So what are the things out there that point to God's existence? Well, we have multitude of... I'm using here the Catholic Church because I know Catholic Church the best. So we have multitude of saints throughout the centuries that come from so many different backgrounds, so many different places, and convinced of God's existence. We have miracles. We have actually a lot of miracles. There's a historical evidence of Jesus Christ in sacred scriptures. The Catholic Church has been giving us a consistent teaching on faith and morals for 2,000 years. No inconsistencies, no mistakes. The human nature, we talked about that a little bit. The witness of martyrs, we have, in the history of the church, we have thousands of people who gave their lives for their faith. That's how convinced they were that it was worth it. We have the philosophical arguments. You can probably all list people, trustworthy people who are believers, scientists, philosophers. The institution of the church still exists. That's the Italian argument for existence of God. The Italians say that if they didn't manage to destroy the church in 2,000 years, it's a miracle and therefore God has to exist. There's something to it. If we face how fallen, sinful, and wounded the individuals in the church are, lay and priests and everyone, religious, it's actually amazing that the church is still here. Right? No one disproved Christianity. I really like that one personally because Christianity is actually a very vulnerable religion. I don't know if you realize that. Science could actually disprove Christianity. Our faith is based on the fact that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. And that's actually a scientific thing. Well, we can scientifically say whether someone is dead or alive. So if Christ was dead, and then later he was alive, he was resurrected, that's a scientific claim. It could be tested by science, that's what I mean. I mean, it is a matter of faith. So the very fact that no one has disproved Christianity for 2,000 years, that says something. I don't know. So there are more. Those are the ones that I sort of... I don't know. Hold on. There's one more. I was told the most convincing argument for the existence of God in Scotland is tea. Tea exists, therefore God exists. So here it is. Those are separate arguments. So if I talk to students, sometimes I come across the students who argue God's existence. I sort of evaluate. I talk to them, and then I try to gauge which argument they would be most likely to receive. And that's, when I teach high school, I usually don't give the philosophical argument. They have a hard time proving that square root of 2 is irrational. How are they going to prove God's existence? But I hope that helps. I mean, that God exists, and it's a reason. Faith is a reasonable thing. So, a few words about the battle between faith and reason. Because if you sit down at Google and type in faith and reason, the image that you're going to get is a battle. That faith and reason are at odds with each other. It's not possible to reconcile them. They fight. And most of the time, it's all traced back to Darwin and the idea of evolution. So I just wanted to say just a few words which hopefully will clarify the vocabulary, because I think that's a very important start for all of us. I'm presuming that none of you are like hardcore scientists, because I'm not. So for us, not scientists, I think the first important thing is to understand what the battle is about, and then maybe we can understand to our children in public schools, the relationship between faith and science, because that seems to be always a big question. So evolution, the idea of evolution goes to Charles Darwin, and it's the idea that the life, the living things, develop slowly through mutation, through random mutation and natural selection. That's definition of evolution. Now, the difficulty right now is that when people use the word evolution, they mean very different things depending on who is talking. So you have to be very careful, because it's very hard to talk about one theory of evolution. We have to talk about actually theories of evolution and then a lot of hypotheses of evolution. And they are both scientific and very often they're actually philosophical. So evolution got to a point that it's not really a question of science right now. It became a question of philosophy and sometimes even theology. And yet it's usually presented as just science, which is inaccurate. So there are four approaches to evolution that are also approaches to faith and reason, the relationship between faith and reason. And those are the atheistic evolution, creationism, intelligent design, and theistic evolution. And those are very well defined terms. So I'll try to give you the definitions of those so that when you see those, you know what they're talking about. So the first one, the atheistic evolution. The atheistic evolution looks at evolution and says that it's random, undirected, without plan nor purpose. That's the formal definition of what evolution is. Now, what that implies is that there's no evidence for God, so it's materialistic in its philosophy. There's no afterlife, there's no objective standard for morality, there's no purpose of existence, there's no free will. So that's why it's called atheistic evolution. There's no room for God nor anything spiritual in it. It's materialistic. It actually, in order to make it reasonable, it has to rely on what's called an infinite multiverse hypothesis. You know how we said that universe is tuned for life, and therefore it's extremely improbable that the life just happened. In order to make that happening, that very small probability reasonable, they actually have to work under the hypothesis that this universe that we see and touch is one on infinitely many or close to infinitely many parallel universes. And you will see it. It's that multiverse hypothesis is very popular in science. And mathematically, it's actually a very interesting idea. But mathematics is about things that we can imagine and have a concept of. It doesn't deal with reality. It's not a scientific idea because there's no way science can prove nor disprove that there are parallel universes. Science can only study this universe. So it's really a philosophical idea. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to evaluate it any further. But you almost, in order to be a serious scientist and hold the position of atheistic evolution, you have to accept something as infinitely many parallel universes, and most of them do. Okay. Creation. Oh, one more comment here that I think is important. Most of the textbooks, science textbooks in schools, present this view of evolution, which is scary, because it doesn't. Just the presentation of it does not leave room for God. Now, that doesn't mean that evolution does not leave room for God, and I'll get to that. So it's not evolution itself, it's this particular approach to evolution, which is atheistic. Okay, creationism is the other side of that. Creationism, the word creationism is used to denote what's called young earth creationism. So it takes on a literal interpretation of the book of Genesis, of the creation of the world. So the world was created in 6 days, and each day was 24 hours. It actually counts the generations in the Genesis, the years of the people, how old they were, and calculates how old the earth is from that. And there are different numbers that people arrive at, but they're all less than 10,000 years. Okay? So with that literal interpretation of the book of Genesis, the logical conclusion is a very young earth. And then creationism runs into a conflict with science. Because science does show that the earth is much older than that. So insofar as creationism is very faithful to the scriptures, it actually, I think, it does some harm to the faith, especially to the young people right now. Because if a young person is sitting in church that proclaims creationism, and then sits in a biology classroom that teaches evolution, they are in a struggle. And many young people, and I should probably ask myself, like, why is that? Why is science more convincing than church? But for young people, it is. So I think it's in our interest, for the sake of the young people, the faith of the young people, salvation of the young people, to have the reconciliation between faith and reason. So, two more. The intelligent design. The intelligent design is actually a response to atheistic evolution. And it was created, I think, 20 years ago or so. It's a movement among theologians, philosophers, and scientists to battle the atheistic evolution. And because they are engaging in a battle, they are trying very hard to disprove the claims of the atheistic evolution. And they do it by trying to find what's called the irreducible complexity. So they are trying to find in nature a thing that's complex but cannot be reduced. So if they can find such a thing, then the evolution cannot explain it. And if the evolution cannot explain it, evolution crashes as a theory. Okay? And they are actually coming from a point of view. They're looking at evolution and they believe that evolution as a process is true, but at certain times it needed an intervention of God. So one of the and how often does the evolution need an intervention? It differs. There's still discussion even among the intelligent design people on that. But one of the common ones, they would say it's okay. All of the cat-like animals could evolve from a common ancestor, but fish and cats couldn't. So different species God had to create by an intervention, by a miracle. There's a little bit of a problem with that, and the problem is that the intelligent design tends to fall into God of gaps arguments. and that reduces God. Because if you are trying to prove God's existence because science cannot explain something, then you are always running a risk of what if science gets better and explains it. Right? So suddenly you're undermining that will undermine your proof of God's existence. So I think it's very good that they are engaging the atheistic evolution in a battle and a dialogue, but there are some issues with that a little bit. And the last one is the theistic evolution. What this position includes is that the universe is 14 billion years old, so it's old as the science would predict right now. It's a very scientific theory here. So the universe has been tuned to life. So there is an understanding that there is a God behind it who's making it all work. The evolution, however, does account for the development of the material world, including the human beings. However, the human being escapes that explanation because of man's spirituality. So the theistic evolution is definitely putting God as a creator, at least a sustainer of the universe. And then there are at least 2 points where I think theistic evolutionists would say that God somehow is essential. And that's the beginning of life, when we go from non-living matter to a living being. That's something that just couldn't happen. And then the appearance of intelligence on Earth, which is humankind. That's another point where there's something more needed. Whether different species, the theistic evolution would be okay with different species have a common ancestor. All right. So here it is. Here are some references if you are interested. There are some good books about the whole relationship between faith and reason, and actually maybe tell you a little bit about the authors. The Language of God, that's written by Francis Collins. Francis Collins he's a Christian, but he was the head of the Human Genome Project. So he's a scientist. He is DNA scientist. So he's in genetics. That's his specialization. He was heading the putting together of the DNA description of a human being that was put together in 2003. And he has a book that's about the relationship between science and faith, which is very good. I highly recommend that one. Case for Creator by Lee Strobel is... Lee Strobel is a journalist who had a major conversion, and he wrote this book. He goes to several different specialists in sciences and philosophy, and he just makes them answer questions about God's existence. It's a very entertaining read if you want more. It's very easy to read. Expelled, that's a documentary movie. You can find it on YouTube. And this one promotes intelligent design. So if you want to know more about intelligent design, that's a good one to look at. If you want to know more about the aggressive atheistic evolution, you can read God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. If you do, I would strongly suggest reading a Catholic replies to Professor Dawkins along with it. It will make more sense. And just beware if you pick up Professor Dawkins. I hope you have some emotional resistance in you, like you are emotionally a strong person, because it's an apologetic book. It's a very heavy rhetoric that's not nice in language. So it's hard. I had a hard time sorting through the emotional attack between getting the argument from all the emotional attack that's going on. So if you read it, you almost have the sense that first you feel stupid for asking the question, and then if you have any doubts about the answer, you feel stupid for not understanding the answer. So But I found it also an interesting read to understand the position. So here it is. It's a little bit longer than I expected, but question answers.